and it is lovely to be in a room where people know the value of kindness and the transformative effect it can have, because what kindness can do on a micro level in our lives and in those immediate lives that we can create that incredible ripple effect in, compassion can do on a macro level, on a national and international level. And the definition of compassion that we are using is feeling empathy for another's predicament and then taking action on the basis of that. And if you think at the moment of all the political problems we have weighing down on us and creating this horrible climate of fear and hate, Brexit, refugee crisis, universal credit, homelessness, they all have one common solution. You know, if we were putting compassion at the centre of our political life, none of those seemingly insurmountable problems would exist. So how do we do that? You know, it says on the leaflets that I think most of you have on your chairs that our goal is quite simply to put compassion, empathy and cooperation at the heart of politics. So we're not very ambitious in our goal. But we do think that it is absolutely achievable. I grew up in the 1970s in this country, and there was a consensus that had been built at the end of the Second World War that we should have a safety net and that we should provide for our fellow citizens from the cradle to the grave. And what's happened during the course of my lifetime is that that consensus, that agreement, has gradually been eroded. And it's been eroded by the messages that politicians have given us. And very like the placebo effect, you know, we are very affected by the messages that we're given. So if we are told that there's no problem with the wealthy getting even wealthier because it will eventually trickle down and help other members of society, as we were told at the start of the 1980s, we might think, oh, okay, so that's all right. So we don't need to worry about redistributing wealth because actually we'll all be better off if you know, the gap between rich and poor grows wider, which is actually a lie. The most happy societies in the world are those where there is most equality. And then if we're told that, in fact, there's no such thing as society and that we should all be geographically mobile and not worry about leaving our homes and our family and our support network to find jobs because, in fact, economic growth was the thing that was going to make all of our lives so much better. And then if we're told that those who claim benefits, those who fall upon hard times, you know, haven't fallen upon hard times because they're unlucky, but because they're somehow on the scrounge, they're on the make, they're scroungers. And then you have a government that sets up a benefits cheats hotline, and very clearly those, you know, connections that David was talking about between Viagra and Niagara. You have benefits and you have cheats, and that connection is made in the public psyche. And then probably for me, the most cynical twist is the final one, which is that you don't even need to feel guilty if you're doing fine and other people aren't, because you would be enabling. The language of psychotherapy has been twisted and distorted so that if you stop to help other people, you're being codependent, you're enabling them to become dependent. The best thing you can do for other people is to leave them to pull themselves together and to get off the ground on their own. So you don't even need to feel guilty, and in fact, if you try to help, you're doing something wrong. Well, most of us know in this room that that is not the right way to approach it. And so what we're trying to do is to change the messages that politicians are giving us. And in order to do that, we have to make it legitimate for politicians to talk about compassion. Politicians at the moment have a very hard time if they talk about well-being or kindness or compassion, because they're seen as kind of soft things, you know, all very well, but quite kind of woolly-minded and yet just not very effective, not living in the real world. You know, the people who live in the real world talk about performance indicators and they talk about economic results and economic growth, but talk about compassion and you're dismissed as being not very practical. And this, of course, ignores all the research which shows us that we will all be much, much happier if we do live with greater levels of kindness and compassion. So the campaign was launched earlier this year. We had a conference in Oxford in October where we gathered together academics and specialists in compassion and kindness and activism. And we've come up with a roadmap for the campaign. And the first thing that we're doing is gathering together as many MPs from different parties as we can. And since that conference in October, when we set that as a goal, we now have MPs from all the 5 political parties that we were hoping to get support from. And they are contacting us on a regular basis, wanting to know how they can join the campaign and support it. And the second thing we're doing is working on a kind of legislative test. So rather like you have the kite mark for safety, you have a stamp that you can give products so that you know as a consumer that they're safe. We want to have a similar mark that we can give legislation so we know whether or not it really is compassionate. And, this is a conversation that we're having now that we'd love all of you to feed into, but there are a couple of things that we know would be criteria for legislation to qualify, one of which is that it can't leave future generations worse off. And if no legislation is allowed to leave future generations worse off, then we can start to solve climate change. The other criteria is that it can't leave the most vulnerable members of society worse off. I don't know how many of you saw the article in today's Guardian. We have 4 million working families in this country living in poverty. We have 1 in 200 people in this country experiencing homelessness. And this is on our watch. And it's very easy when you read those articles to feel powerless and to feel hopeless and turn away. There's nothing we can do. But it's absolutely not the case. All of us have agency. So I'm very grateful to Mark for inviting me along and letting me put these leaflets, and for those volunteers who put the leaflets on your chairs. But what I would love is if you could do 2 things if you support our goals. One is either to fill out your details and leave it at the back or on the chair for me, and then we will sign you up to our mailing list, and we will sign you up as a supporter. And the other is if you want instead to go online when you're at home and sign up on our website, which is compassionpolitics.com. If you're on social media, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, because the more we have, the more leverage we have. When politicians know that they're backed by tens of thousands and hopefully hundreds of thousands of people, they will be listened to. When broadcasters know that when we talk about compassion, we're not doing it from the side streams, we're doing it for the mainstream, that will make a huge difference. So if as you leave or when you get home tonight, you could sign up on our website. And the second thing is ask 2 other people to do the same thing. We would be incredibly grateful. And thank you so much for your time and for inviting me to speak.
Thank you.